On this week's episode of A Drier Dose of Disney, Jared shares where the cleanest and worst restrooms are at the theme parks.
Welcome to this week's episode of A Drier Dose of Disney. I'm your host, Jared Drier, and today we've actually got a really interesting topic for you. One that a lot of you may think, why do we need to know about this, or is this important at all? But talking to our friends about it, we decided to go ahead and record an episode on the best and worst restroom locations at the parks. And like I said, it's a funny topic. A lot of people may not be thinking that this is an important topic, but to a select group of individuals out there, I know that this is a very important topic. This is a big deal. And this is something that is talked about like on Seinfeld, where George Costanza talks about the best restrooms in all of New York. And even within our own lives, we have friends and family that will only use certain restrooms. If they're out and about, they're probably not going to use a public one, or they're going to want to go back home first. And let's be honest, if you're spending your entire day at a Disney or Universal park, that's probably not too realistic. You probably need a chance to relieve yourself and to go use a restroom. So we're going to talk about which ones are the cleanest and the best ones at all of the different parks, both in Orlando and over in Anaheim or in LA. And we're going to go park by park today. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to tell you my personal experiences at all the different parks and which ones we really like and which ones are the ones to definitely stay away from because they're filthy and there's a ton of people in them. So we're going to go through all those with you today. But before we do that, I do want to ask, wherever you're listening to this podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and find that pause button and then click subscribe. So that way you're going to get this content delivered to you as we record episodes. And if you've listened to our last few episodes, you know that we're not doing those weekly anymore, mostly due to the fact that we've already got 80 plus episodes out there, and we've covered a large majority of the topics that are available to us. So now we're doing episodes more sporadically. If you've listened to our past episodes over the last couple months, you know that we are planning a trip to Disneyland Paris, and we're very excited about that. And we will be covering that for you once we get back from that trip. And we'll be able to go through and talk about all the fun things that we did, all the great restaurants, all the great food, and the city itself. So we will have a lot of episodes coming. We do want to do more international parks, but for the time being, we're trying to pepper in some of these more off-the-wall type episodes. And obviously today we're talking about restrooms. In addition to that, you can see on my screen, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm down here in the bottom corner, but we have our I Can Do This All Day tip of the day logo here in the middle of the screen. And if you like that logo, we do sell merchandise with this logo over at our Etsy shop. And you can find the link for that in the podcast or video description down below. And then we also like to ask if there's any tips or tricks that saved you time or money. You can support the show over at Patreon. And that is down in the links as well. And we do have some great tips and tricks out there for you at our very top tier, because the one that's out there is amazing. It's the best tip or trick we have ever seen. So diving into today's episode, talking about the best and worst restrooms. Like I said, a lot of people, this is important to. Now, maybe you had a little bit too much to drink, and if you're a guy, you can pop right into any restroom. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're going to go use a stall, or maybe you ate too much and you're needing to relieve yourself, you're going to want to go to one that's going to be clean. Nobody likes to walk into a dirty stall. And you're going to want to go to a restroom that is going to have one available. And let's be honest, a lot of times when we're in the parks, we see lines at different restrooms. And then you're subjected to whatever one opens up next. And you don't know if it's going to be clean or dirty, or if the last person used it. So we're going to take you through today some of our best tips and tricks for finding the cleanest restrooms in the parks. And we're also going to go through maps today. That's why I'm doing this. If you're watching on YouTube, that's why I'm doing this on my screen here. So that way I can take you through different maps and I can point out the worst ones, the ones to completely avoid. And then I'm going to point out the ones that we absolutely love and are always cleaned. So a lot of great information for you today. And like I said, we're covering each and every single park. Now, some general rules of thumb. When you're thinking about restrooms at the park, do know that at all the parks, both Disney and Universal, they have a great crew that are working there, and they're doing their absolute best to keep the restrooms as clean as possible. But there's a lot of things to think about when you're wandering around the park and in different areas. So for example, one area that I like to point out is if you want a restroom that's going to have clean floors, stay away from water ride areas. So for example, over at Universal Islands of Adventure, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you get into the cartoon land with Bluto's Bilge, the rafts over there, and you've got the Dudley Do Right Ripsaw Falls. So you got two water rides right next to each other, and the restrooms in that area usually have a lot of water on the floor. People go in there to use a hand dryer to try to dry off their clothes. Their shoes are all wet. They're squishing water out of their shoes all over the floor. And so if you want a restroom that doesn't have water on the floor, I recommend stay away from that one. And then likewise, all the other water rides at all the other different parks. If you want a restroom that's going to be less crowded, then you're going to want to stay off the main thoroughfares through the parks. You're going to want to find the ones that are off the beaten paths. And that's honestly where a lot of these are going to be today that we're going to talk to you about. That's what you're going to want to look for. Of course, the ones that are in the busiest areas are always going to have the most people, but they're the easiest to find, and they're the quickest usually to get in and out if you just don't have a lot to do in there. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right into this. And we're going to start today over at Magic Kingdom in Orlando. And so I did my best to find interactive or maps that we can show here on the screen that are large enough for you to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out a couple key points about each of the parks, which are where are the worst restrooms in the park. So like where to completely avoid, and then where you can find the best ones. So starting here at Magic Kingdom, if you're familiar with this park, I can tell you right out of the gates, the worst restroom in this entire park is going to be over in the Fantasyland area next to Peter Pan. It's a Small World, and it's what I like to call the Tangled restroom. And the reason is that the tower from Tangled is right behind it. And so a lot of people are familiar with this area. The reason it's so bad is it's highly trafficked. It's right between Fantasyland and then the Haunted Mansion. And there are also charge ports over at this restroom, meaning that outside where some of the logs are, there's areas to plug in. So it's very busy. There's a ton of strollers, tons of little kids. And this restroom is one that typically has lines. If you're wanting to take some time, this is going to be one you're going to want to stay away from. It is very crowded. It is very busy. Likewise, if you look around the park map here, you can see that in some areas, specifically over in Tomorrowland, there's really only one good restroom over here. And this is between the Carousel of Progress and Space Mountain. And so this one is pretty busy because for the whole area, it's the main restroom. Now, you do have one in this building here where there are some shops and a restaurant, but most of the park goers that are out and about hitting rides are going to go over to the main one over there. So that one's going to be very busy as well. So the ones that we prefer over at Magic Kingdom is actually over in Adventureland by Pirates of the Caribbean. And it's actually inside the store at the exit of Pirates of the Caribbean is a restroom. And you can actually get to it two different ways. So through the store is the easiest. It's easy to find that way. But if you're outside, you can walk down a little path on the side of the building and it will wind you around to the backside to where that restroom is. Because this one's kind of hidden in the back of the store and it's not a highly trafficked area other than the fact Pirates of the Caribbean is right there, this one is usually typically open. This one has a lot of availability in it and it's usually very clean. So we really like that one. And then the other one that we really like is in the back of Fantasyland over by Gaston's Tavern. And this is where you can get a LeFou's brew. If you've never had one of those are fantastic. The best way for me to describe where this is, it's between Beast Castle and Ariel's Under the Sea Adventure behind Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So you're going to go all the way into the back of the Fantasyland and it's all the way back there. You'll see a statue out in front of Gaston's Tavern. And like I said, great place to stop and get a drink of LeFou's brew. And they also have great cinnamon rolls there. But that restroom, because it's so far back and it's hidden behind it, is always available. There's never a line. There's never a lot of people back there. And that one's always clean. So those are our two go-to restrooms over here at Magic Kingdom, is in the back of Fantasyland and over by Pirates of the Caribbean. Like I said, over by Splash Mountain, which is being rethemed right now, that one is also off the beaten path, but you're usually going to have people that are coming in there trying to dry off. And so that floor is usually going to be wet. It's not always the cleanest. Next, let's go over to Epcot. And I had a tough time finding a really good Epcot map that's up to date because of Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind and had some of the restrooms listed on them. But this one was a good one. It's a little bit smaller on the screen, so I apologize for that. And Epcot. Epcot has some of the worst restrooms at all of the Disney parks. And the reason is just plain logistics. For example, the ones that we hate the most, there are two restrooms in this park that are absolutely disgusting. You want to stay away from them. They are both in the exact same area, so they're right next to each other. And they are over here. So this is in the front of the park over towards Test Track, Mission Space, and Guardians of the Galaxy. And the reason they're so bad is you have three major rides over here, and the only restrooms in the area are right here towards the center of the park. What I mean towards the center is over towards Connections Cafe. So inside Connections Cafe, if you go in there, there's Connections Cafe and there's a Starbucks. And this place is busy all day long. And inside there is a restroom in there. But I have never been in there where I didn't see a long line of people. It's not the biggest restroom, and it's very busy in this restroom. And you're always going to be waiting in a line, and you're subject to the stall that you're going to get. And it's just not the cleanest one just because it's so busy. Right outside, though, of Connection Cafe, behind the Coca-Cola Experience over there, is another restroom. This one's outdoor facing. And because the 3 rides over there, this is their only access point. That is a very busy restroom. Now, like I said, if you have to use the restroom and you're just going to pop in real quick, especially if you're a guy, it's not too bad. But trust me when I say this one's very, very busy. If you need to find something in the area, I recommend going over here just a little bit towards the World Showcase. There is a pavilion. And if you go in that pavilion, there's a restroom indoors in there. And so you're going to have nice AC. That one's a little less busy, but it's not one of our top picks. So that's the only other restroom, though, in that area. So like I said, these ones are definitely dirty and filthy. And then when you go into World Showcase, there are 2 areas that I would say try to stay away from. Number 1 is in Norway, over by the Frozen ride, Frozen Ever After. And then they have the bakery over there and whatnot. But in the backside of that is a restroom. This one's a little bit cleaner, but this one is also very busy due to the fact that it's the only restroom between Mexico all the way up to China. And a lot of people are waiting for the Frozen ride. So this one's always going to be busy as well. You're usually going to have a line. This one's pretty dirty. And then over here in France, over by Ratatouille in the back, this one's also very busy due to France being a larger land of the World Showcase. A lot of people like to go to France. That one's very busy. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't stay very clean throughout the day. So those are the ones that I would say I would totally avoid. When you're going through the World Showcase, you can find that after Norway and France, you do have a series of restrooms across the back of the park. Germany's not too bad. Morocco's not too bad. But our favorite one is in the back of the American Adventure over by the art store. And the reason this one's so good is because it's further back and you have sales pavilions out in the front of the American Adventure. So a lot of people don't wander too far back. So they're not going to see it. So in the back of the American Adventure is one of the best restrooms in the park. But our absolute favorite ones, there's 2 of them, are going to be towards the front of the park, and they are going to be over in the Land Pavilion and in the Living Seas Pavilion. So in the Living Seas, when you ride Finding Nemo and you go in there and you get to see all the cool aquariums, there is a restroom in the back of this building. It only has a handful of stalls, but it's not very busy because not a lot of people find it back there. So that one's usually pretty clean. It is a little dark in there due to poor lighting, but I would say that this is one of the cleanest restrooms in the park. But our absolute favorite, and this one is key, you guys, because there is a secret to this, is in the Land Pavilion. So this is where you have Soarin' and Living with the Land. They have restrooms on both floors. So they have a restroom on the top floor over by the Garden Grill, and then they have one on the bottom floor by Soarin'. So the one by Soarin' on the bottom floor is usually pretty busy just due to the ride. So that one we say stay away from. But if you go up one floor and you go right above where the other one is, next to Garden Grill and where the elevators are, there are restrooms on the second floor of this building that nobody ever uses and no one ever knows about because they all know about the one on the first floor. So on the second floor, again, by Garden Grill, this one is the cleanest restroom in the entire park, and it's large. It is as big as the one on the first level, and there are tons of stalls in these restrooms, and no one's ever in them. So that is our number 1 choice for the restrooms over at Epcot. Let's go over now to Hollywood Studios. And Hollywood Studios has a weird layout. If you've been to this park, you're familiar with that. And I'm going to tell you the worst restrooms at Hollywood Studios are going to be over by the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular and Star Tours ride in this area. So this is over by Echo Lake. And that's just because with the show over there, and actually you have multiple shows because you have the Frozen sing-along as well, you don't have a lot of restrooms for that area. There is a second one over by the Muppets 4D, but that one's kind of tucked away a little bit. So a lot of people hit this one here on the corner by Star Tours. And this one is absolutely filthy and busy all day long. So that one is one that we don't like. The other one we don't like is over here in Toy Story Land. And it's because it's the only one in Toy Story Land. So you've got Slinky Dog Dash, you've got Midway Mania, and this restroom is very busy and there's tons of little kids in the area. So it's usually pretty dirty in that restroom. Throughout the rest of the park, you do have them peppered throughout the park. They're usually pretty decent, but our 2 favorite, and one of them is counterintuitive, our 2 favorite is going to be over here in Galaxy's Edge. You have a restroom that's in the little shops. It's off the path because it's in the shops. It's over by Ronto Roasters. This restroom actually is pretty busy, but this is one of the cleanest restrooms we've seen at a Disney park. And the reason I say that is I have never in my entire life been in this restroom where I didn't see a worker actively cleaning it. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm being 100% honest. I've never been in the men's room over there where there wasn't somebody sweeping the floor, cleaning up one of the stalls, taking care of this restroom. So because of that, I feel like this restroom is really clean. They do a really good job of keeping it open. And because it's a little bit off the beaten path, it's usually pretty vacant, meaning that you usually have multiple stalls to choose from. And so we really like this restroom. And this is counterintuitive because Galaxy's Edge is a busy part of the park. But our second one is over here in the animation courtyard. Now, currently, the Little Mermaid show is closed. That should be reopening soon. But in this courtyard, you've got the Disney Junior group over here. But there's not a lot happening. Not a lot of people go in this courtyard. And in the back over by the Star Wars photo op area, there is a restroom in the back corner over there. And this one is not very utilized over there. So we really like those two restrooms over at Hollywood Studios. Those are going to be your best bet. Now, if you need an additional one and you're over by Tower of Terror, the one on the corner by Tower of Terror is not too bad. If you do have the Beauty and the Beast show letting out, that one's going to be very busy at that point in time. But outside of that, that one's not terrible. So it's an honorable mention. But our two go-to are Galaxy's Edge and Animation Courtyard. Now, let's go over to Animal Kingdom. And at Animal Kingdom, this park is a large park. It is very spread out. And the bad thing about Animal Kingdom is there are not a lot of restrooms throughout this park with as much square footage as there is. So that's important to call out. Out of the gates, I can tell you some of the worst restrooms in the park are going to be in Africa. And that is because of the safari over here and the fact that there's usually a long line for that. And people are on the safari, meaning they've already left and they're out driving around. And when they come back, it's been a long time. It's been about 30 or 40 minutes of just the ride itself. And so they may need a restroom when they get back. So this one in Africa is extremely busy. This one is one of the dirtiest ones in the park. So you want to watch out for that, as well as then two others over here on Discovery Island over by the Bengal Barbecue. This one is a very busy restroom over here throughout the day. You'll see usually a line over there. That one's not very clean. And then over here in Pandora, there's two restrooms, but the one over by the cantina after the exit of Flight of Passage is usually pretty busy. And that's because Flight of Passage usually has a longer line. People have been waiting. They've done the ride. They come off. That's the closest one. That one usually has a line as well. So those are the three that we would say to avoid. But for the three, because this park actually has three that we do and three that are usually pretty available. The first is going to be on the pathway between Pandora and Africa over here. And that's because this path, not a lot of people walk. So this one is definitely out of scope for a lot of people. They usually cut back to Discovery Island and up to Africa, or they're using Discovery Island to cut through to another piece of the park. So not many people go up this back path. So that is a great restroom there. We also like Rafiki's Planet Watch. So if you've never done that, you have to take a train. This is a little cutout here at the top of the map that shows you what's up there because it's actually quite a ways away. But at Rafiki's Planet Watch, you can go into the main building there. They have lots of little reptiles. They do the animation studio there where you can draw the different characters. That's a ton of fun. But because not a lot of people go back there, Rafiki's Planet Watch is usually pretty clean, and that one's always available. And then our favorite one is going to be over here behind the Finding Nemo show. So in the backside of the auditorium, and it's still outside, you have to go down a path to get down there. There's a restroom down there. And the reason we really like this one is no one knows about it. So when you're walking past Finding Nemo, most people are going to continue towards Dino Land, or they're going to continue towards Asia, and they don't go down the path behind the auditorium. And so back here is a restroom, and this one is always clean, always available, and is a great place to go if you ever need it. So those are our recommendations over at Animal Kingdom. Now let's stay in Orlando. We're going to hop over to Universal Studios Orlando. And the rule of thumb for Universal Studios, Islands of Adventure, and Hollywood are all about the same. And it is stay away from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. These are some of the worst restrooms. They are the most busy by far. Now, There is a fun element that you do have moaning Myrtle in these restrooms, and you do hear her on the audio side of it talking and whatever she says when she's in there. So that's a fun experience if you've never been in there. But a lot of people go to the restrooms in there because of that. And Harry Potter Land is one of the busiest areas of the park. So that is always going to be an area where there's going to be a ton of people, and a lot of them are going to be using the restroom. So we say stay away from Harry Potter Land as best that you can. We actually have 3 restrooms that we like at Universal Studios Florida here. The first one, and this map doesn't show them, so I'm going to point them out with my mouse here. The first one is over in the New York area of the park, and this is where the Mummy ride is. If you go to the right of the Mummy, there's an alley right here. So I'm highlighting it here on my screen. I'm circling it with my mouse. There is a restroom at the back of that alley. That one is usually really clean, and the reason is no one knows about it. So you're between the Mummy and you're between the Mummy and Fast and Furious, and in that little alley back there is a restroom. Our second one is between Men in Black and the Harry Potter Land. This little building right here over by the auditorium is a restroom, and not a lot of people make it all the way back here. This is a less busy area of the park. This one's usually pretty available, but we do see people popping in and out of this one. So this one is definitely our second choice behind the one over by the Mummy. The third choice is going to be over by E.T. in the SpongeBob area. There is a restroom back here. Now, go back in time. Today, this part of the park isn't open anymore where Woody Woodpecker's roller coaster was and the Fievel's playground was. They are doing some refurbishing back there, and they're rebuilding some stuff out. So because of that, this is a great restroom to use today. I will say in the future, if this area of the park opens up more, that restroom is going to become very busy again, and I'm going to say probably stay away from it. But today, with it all being closed off over by ET, that is a good restroom as well. Let's go over to Islands of Adventure. And again, likewise at Islands of Adventure, this map doesn't show where the restrooms are in here, so I'll be circling the area with my mouse. But if you're familiar with Islands of Adventure, this is a large circular park around a big lake. So you're going to be walking around the whole lake as you go through the park, which limits your availability to cut back and forth through the park. So because of that, I'm going to give you 2 different options on this one of ones that we prefer. But like I said at the top of the episode, we try to stay away from the water rides over in the Toon Lagoon area, just because those restrooms are very wet. We also, again, stay away from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter over in Hogsmeade. There's only one restroom back in there, and that one is very busy. In fact, I'd say out of the entire Universal Orlando area, that is the busiest restroom is in Hogsmeade over there. So those are the 2 that we say stay away from. Now, the 2 that we like aren't far away. So the good news is over here by letter M in Jurassic Park World, M is the pizza place in Jurassic Park. It's up on the top of the hill, but back behind it is a restroom. And that one, I don't know why, that one is always open. There's no one ever back in there. That one is always clean. So we really like that restroom up at the top of Jurassic Park over by the pizza place. And then a honorable mention is going to be over in Seuss Landing. There's a restroom right before you go into the Lost Continent over there, as well as there's one in Lost Continent as well. So those 2 aren't too bad. But Seuss Landing is going to be almost the opposite side of the park for you. There are more kids in this area, but this is a less busy area of the park as most people just walk through and they're going over into the Wizarding World, Jurassic Park, Toon Lagoon, or they want to go to the Marvel area. So that side of the park, it almost looks like a heart on this map. What I call the left side of the park from Wizarding World all the way to Marvel superhero area is going to be very busy. This Seuss Landing, Lost Continent, less busy. Those restrooms are going to be more readily available for you. With that, let's hop over now to Anaheim. We're going to go to Disneyland, and Disneyland has a lot of different options for you. I'm going to tell you some of the worst ones. Magic Kingdom are going to be in Fantasyland. So you've got ones over here by Pinocchio. Those ones are busy. The one off to the side over by the Matterhorn over here isn't too bad. This one at Pinocchio is definitely worse. But I will say Fantasyland's always going to be busier. There's more strollers. It's crowded. Lots of little kids. These restrooms over here are definitely swamped all day. Usually you're going to have a line over there. And then the second area I would say to avoid is going to be over here by New Orleans Square. There's a restroom back over here by the railway. This one is very busy because this is the easiest to find restroom between Pirates and the Haunted Mansion. So this one is very busy over here as well. Now, the restrooms that we like over at Disneyland, I will tell you, that we've only found a couple of good ones here. The first one is going to be over here on Main Street by the first aid station. And the reason is you have to go down a little path to get there, and not a lot of people go there. Like I said, towards the top of the episode, if you can get off the main thoroughfares, get away from the crowds, you're going to find cleaner restrooms. So the one by the first aid station is really good. The second one that we like is over here in Frontierland, and this is by the restaurant over by Big Thunder Mountain. In there, there's a restroom towards the back of the restaurant that's in a little cut-through area back here. And this one, for some reason, not a lot of people can find. So that is a really good restroom right towards the center of the park. Now, of course, if you're in the back of the park, I will say over by Small World, there is one over here by the pavilion where they have shows. That one, it's a little bit tucked away. That helps. But back in Mickey's Toontown, there's only one isolated back there. Over by the Bayou Adventure or Splash Mountain, again, you're by a water ride. That one's a little bit busier too. And a lot of people are trying to dry off in there. So our two recommendations, again, are over by the first aid station and in Frontierland. The ones to stay away from are Fantasyland and New Orleans Square. Let's go over to California Adventure. And at California Adventure, the worst restrooms, and when I say worst, again, the busiest, the ones that are the least clean, are going to be over here in Cars Land by Flo's V8 Cafe. It's actually behind the cafe up a little street here. This is the only one in Cars Land, and if you've been there, Cars Land is very busy. This one is so busy, there's lines almost all day long to get into these restrooms. So you're not going to find much peace and quiet back there. So I would stay away from that. And then over in Hollywood Land on Hollywood Boulevard, there is a restroom right here between some of the shops and by the animation studio. And that one also is pretty busy. And it's just because in all the shop areas, this is the go-to restroom for our favorite restrooms at California Adventure are going to be number one, over here in the back of the pier area by Goofy's Sky School. There's one tucked in the back corner over there by these restaurants. Just because not a lot of people make it all the way into this back corner, this one has a good area, a good restroom. And then over here by Monsters, Inc. and by the theater on this side of the park over in Hollywood Land, this one, again, because it's behind some stuff, it's tucked away. That one is usually pretty clean as well. So we do recommend going there. This map that you're looking at right now of California Adventure does have Bugs Land over here. This was the best map I could find, which is now changed over to Marvel, the Marvel campus. Again, there's only one restroom in there, so that one's also pretty busy, so I would try to stay away from that. So I apologize that I'm using an outdated map, but this was the best one I could find and get zoomed in properly. So again, stay away from Cars Land, stay away from Hollywood Land, this one here on the street. The best two are by Goofy Sky School and then back here by Monsters, Inc. Our final park is going to be Universal Studios Hollywood, and this one is easy to talk about because there are no good restrooms at Universal Studios Hollywood. They are all terrible. This is a smaller park if you've never been there. It is very tight in this park. You've got the new Super Nintendo World, which is really cool, but there is only a handful of restrooms in this entire park at all, period. There's one in Super Nintendo World. There's one right out by Jurassic World, The Mummy. Those are crazy busy all the time. There's one over here by Simpsons Land. There's one in Harry Potter Land, which we said on the other Universal Florida side of it, stay away from Harry Potter Land. These areas are busy. There is one at the bottom of the escalator down by the studio tour. This one's not terrible early in the day, but as the day goes on, because people are on the studio tour for about 40 minutes when they come off, they're all going to run to this restroom. So this one is always going to be highly utilized as well. So this one's not great. And then over here in the Despicable Me Minion area of the park, Secret Life of Pets, there are restrooms over by Funland and by Secret Life of Pets. But this is a very busy area of the park because there's a lot of kids in this area. And because there's a lot of kids, these restrooms are also messy. It's a crapshoot when you're going to Universal Studios Hollywood. Like I said, none of them are great. It is what it is. You just have to pick and choose and make your way through the day. City Walk, though, does have some restrooms that are cleaner. So I will encourage you. This park is usually one that people knock out in half of a day or 3/4 of a day. If you're able to wait and get out into City Walk, you can do that on your way out of the park. But as a whole, there's no really good answer to Universal Studios Hollywood. And for that, I apologize. But with that, we hope you have a magical week as you're planning your next vacation. Thank you for bearing with me as we talk through the best, cleanest restrooms at all the different Disney and Universal parks. I know that's a weird topic, but for a lot of people, they're very particular about where they're going to sit and relax for just a second if they're going to use the restroom. So we hope that this has been informative for those of you that this is important to. And then, like I said, stay tuned and get subscribed so that way, as we continue to release episodes, you're going to be alerted to those as they come out. We'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.